representation of sex worker. I am not CSI style forensics TV show. I am not DNA evidence on a Port Coquitlam farm. I am not a mugshot. I am not a pair of legs for you to look at and rent. I am not a subject object of your intellectual discourse. I am not a future you fear for your wayward teenage daughters. I breathe, I shout, and I get mad. Someone told me my anger is a gift, and I'm gonna knock your teeth out with this gift.
Thank you, Mercedes. Good morning, everybody. That was Mercedes Ang reading from her book, Mercenary English. Greetings from Treaty 7 territory. I'd like to begin by paying my respects to the people on whose traditional lands this event is being hosted today. The Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Wesley First Nations. Mohkinstsis, also known as the City of Calgary, is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. I'd also like today to acknowledge the mass grave that was discovered yesterday. I think it's really, really important. I think a lot of us are sitting today with this grief of the mass grave discovered on Tk'emlúps and Secwepemc territories, and express my grief and solidarity with the Tk'emlúps and Secwepemc people. Alberta is a province where historically many Black people came to work as fur traders and cowboys. In the early 1900s, many also came in a mass exodus from Oklahoma. My name's Larissa Lai. I'm Hong Kong Chinese with roots in the Pearl River Delta. I arrived in Calgary by way of Kumeyaay, Beothuk, and Coast Salish lands. I'm a prof, a writer, and an occasional cultural organizer. And I'm truly honored to have been invited to moderate this panel in particular. I'll be facilitating today with the lightest touch I can muster, just enough to keep us on track. I'd like to acknowledge all of the people who made this event possible today. Thank you so much to Rajon Hollett for taking care of the tech. Thank you to Lokchi Lam for web design and communications. Tremendous gratitude to Beverly Bain and Min Suk Lee for hosting the project through Scholar Strike Canada. Finally, much respect and appreciation to the organizing committee, comprised of Richard Fung, Shelley Jiang, Monica Gagnon, Robert Diaz, and Min Suk Lee. It's an honor to be part of this event that's been so intelligently and compassionately thought through. The speakers today are Mina Do, Mercedes Ang, and Aline Lam. I had the pleasure of having a preliminary visit with Mina and Mercedes last weekend to get to know them and to plan this event. I'm meeting Aline for the first time today. Last Saturday, Mina and Mercedes gave me the bulk of their morning and generously shared thoughts and experiences around sex work, activism, writing, and art. I was blown away by the depth of their knowledge and their generosity. For me, as a kind of head person, a professor, writer, occasional cultural organizer, it was a tremendous honor to be in the presence of these two, now three, extraordinary humans who have done the work and share so abundantly and with such grace. I grieve the women who were shot and killed in Atlanta. This is not, however, the first time that brutal violence and death have been visited upon sex workers. If we are to prevent more such death and more such violence, we must attend again to how racism, misogyny, and sex worker violence intersect. I won't say more than this, as I'm here to learn as much as anyone else in the audience. Our speakers are the ones carrying the expertise. There's so much to share with us, and for this reason, we will not be entertaining a Q&A at the end. I'll just tell you something about each of them, and then I'll let them take the floor. So first of all, Mercedes Ang is the author of Mercenary English, Prison Industrial Complex, and she's the winner of the BC Poetry Prize. Prison Industrial Complex, which is the winner of the BC Poetry Prize, as well as My YT Mama. Her writing has appeared in Hustling Verse, an anthology of sex workers' poetry, Jacket 2, Asian American Literary Review, The Abolitionist, and Rally, published by No One Is Illegal. Mina Doe has asked me not to read her bio, so I would just like to say that I'm blown away by her intelligence. It was so wonderful to meet you last weekend, Mina. And I'm blown away by your intelligence, your generosity, your articulateness, and of course, your gravitational pull. She's been a wise teacher for me already, and I expect will be so for us today. And for me, so much more, I hope for a long time, Mina. And then Aline Lam is the executive director of Butterfly, Asian and Migrant Sex Workers Support Network. She has involved sex workers, labor, she has been involved in sex workers, labor, migrants, gender, and racial justice movements for over 20 years. She is a PhD candidate at McMaster University, and you can check out her work at www.butterflysw.org. So we've agreed that there's 5 ideas, which are also practices around which we're going to structure the event today. And the first one is mutual aid. So I'll give the floor to the three of you to begin talking about that. And I'm just going to go and close my door. I'll be right back, but please start.
Well, I guess I had wanted, my name is Mercedes Singh. I am joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, whose territories I live on as a Chinese settler. I had wanted to talk about mutual aid, something that I think is relevant to all of us, maybe most of us, particularly at this moment where we've seen, particularly in the United States during the pandemic, mutual aid come to the fore, something that's been practiced for a long time, but something that maybe some of us became more aware of during the pandemic. But I think about my time in the survivor sex trade in Vancouver's downtown East Side neighborhood back in the 90s. And I think about the kind of mutual aid that we sex workers were engaging in. So sometimes a girl would show up to work, and if we had extra condoms, the single serving size packets of lube, the bad date sheet, which is a sheet that lists the physical descriptions of a person in a car who might be threatening or abusive to sex workers. So I remember girls arriving at the stroll and sharing condoms, sharing lube, sharing these bad date sheets, but also sharing this information about dates amongst ourselves as well. I think about the concern that we workers had for younger girls when they showed up, and what it was that we could do to support them so they didn't start working at the age that they were at. So it's just that mutual aid is something that I have been thinking about a lot lately, thinking about how long that we have been engaging in these practices and how heartening it is to see it occurring more and more and more.
Thanks for that. I like the way you mentioned too, maybe this pandemic, maybe the concept, I mean, I didn't know the term mutual aid. It's one of those grassroots things, like you don't know your grassroots until someone explains what you're like, oh, that's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's called mutual aid now. Okay, so we're experts on mutual aid.
Yeah.
And sex worker organizing has, again, out of necessity been doing this, creating communities before, creating a website out of need and necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I'm going to do shout outs to this whole thing because yesterday's panels were so good. At this moment, I'm going to shout out Dina Ladd, who when speaking with Winnie Ng, they were talking about, I know that the Workers Action Center knows about mutual aid, and I know they know about Butterfly and have done like this cross learning. I think of mutual aid too amongst us as organizers. Like,
Mm.
how do we support each other? This is our topic today too, right? Sharing also in knowledge, sharing in strategies that we can share and support. And then also on the ground, the practical. When the people you are serving are us and we're working together, it's all of us, then you just naturally, you consider like, okay, let's feed this meeting. You're coming in for this reason, for needs. This might also be the moment you get politicized. I mean, I see that this is how Butterfly has been always organized. Every meeting, every organizing. I don't know if Elaine, you want to talk about that? Was it a planned thing? It's just this way?
Yeah, I think when we talk about mutual aid, there is like different aspect, right? One is before any organization, workers themselves, and particularly for the marginalized people, that they have been isolated, marginalized, they have been using their network to support each other. They already use the resources to have that kind of mutual aid, right? So for example, you can't imagine how brave the woman, just come to Canada without knowing the language, don't know anyone. It's just by feel connection, right? So no matter, some people may pay for the arrangement, some people may not pay for the arrangement. There is already a network to support each other. How to find a place to live, how to find a place to work, doing advertisement, having a driver to drive them to TNT to buy some Chinese food and Chinese cooker that can cook any kind of food, right? So, and also like trying to find a place where you can have good client, and this is already the strong network, people already using their support network to have that kind of mutual aid. But unfortunately, because of the law, actually make this legal aid, mutual aid become illegal, right? So that when workers work together, when someone help other people to do advertisement, it's become illegal. And when we talk about mutual aid, so there is like different parties. So for example, workers themselves help each other, right? I may come here a long time, so I may help other workers, they are just new to here. And some people, they may be having the other role, some retired worker, they answer the phone for other worker, but that is all being criminalized because all the third party become illegal. And we also find there is also important people, just like the driver or the people, help them to set up the dates, is all being criminalized. And also very important mutual support is also from client, right? Client working with the worker, they get a lot of support. It's not only sexual service, but also emotion support, the sense of care. This is amazing, powerful, a kind of mutual support. Even there maybe it's money exchange, right? Sometimes we see more than money. We hear the story when there is a client need to do the surgery, no family member is here. She's the only person visit him to bring some soup, right? Soup is good for health, but also is the sense of care, right? So, and when the woman being deported, he's the only person went to the, detention center to visit him, to buy her a ticket to. So, and I think this is a powerful network, but client again is being criminalized, right? So that is how the mutual support is important for the community. It's being seen as organized crime, and being criminalized activity is very clear. The purpose is very clear. That just take away the power, take away the resources, take away the support system, right? So this is how we see that the worker already self-organized, have the support, but because of there are so many barriers, and also of course, like any kind of relationship, there is a lot of power dynamic. So why Butterfly jump in is because if someone only know one person, that is maybe in the relationship, there maybe have complicated situation, there may be power dynamic. So Butterfly want to provide a platform. So information is power, but also help the worker to connect to different people. They do not only know one boss, right? They may know more boss or agent, or they may know how to book the Airbnb themselves so that they can gain the agency, right? That by this mutual support, by share the information, and also create a network so that we have the outreach worker to reach out to them and share the resources, information, and support each other, and how to connect them with the social resources. And I think Butterfly is using very different model, because now we see so many peer program in the social service organization, but the peer is always being looked down by the social service organization. They're being seen as non-professional because of the funding requirement. They just need the people in the industry, to help them to do the work. But I think the genuinely believe the power of the community is important. So that's why Nina say the grassroots powers is important. This is not the social service organization offer the service. The service is important to make the people can get resources and power, but this is not come from the up down relationship. This is the network, and then some people, and as the organization that we may have more network, we can, so for example vaccine, we can connect to the doctor, the all hip for all. We know that like some vaccine services for people without documents, so that we can help to bring that, and then the community can do it, and of course they will share the message to all other people, right? So, and I think this is very powerful, see as the mutual aid, but we see how this system oppress the people by taking away the mutual support. They know this mutual support is powerful. That's why they want to criminalize it and isolate it. And the most horrible thing of the social worker is they make you be more marginalized, and you need to dependent on them, right? So, and that create a marginalization, that no support system, and they are only the safer that they can help you. So I think this is very problematic to see how the institution behind to make particularly Asian community and many other racialized community be marginalized, and particularly sex workers. So.
Hence the specific need for grassroots mutual aid, and not from, we're going to talk about the problems for that. I'm sorry, I'm suddenly moderating, but I just want to point out something so bold. Like there was so much in there, but can I just repeat one thing that you said? I don't know if everyone's going to be ready to hear, who might not already understand around the politics of this. Elaine said that the client-worker relationship in itself, whether you identify as a sex worker or not, or just have some relationship where sex is traded, and that is a way that you are accessing resources, that relationship in itself is mutual aid. So whether it is with your peers and colleagues or with your client directly, that is a relationship of mutual aid. And for the matter of being a criminalized person, that mutual aid is criminalized. Just had to repeat that bomb.
Amazing.
That's so important. Thank you, all three of you. I mean, what I'm really kind of learning from listening is how rich relationships are among, among all the folks involved. And I think particularly what Elaine said about, if all the relationships are criminalized except for the relationship with the social worker, then that really damages that sort of, that rich set of relationships in really, really destructive ways. So thank you for that. And I also think that this discussion segues really beautifully into the next topic we wanted to discuss, which is the decriminalization of sex work. Could I invite you to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just want to say, because I think the many anti-trafficking organization and anti-sex work organization, they promote the illusion, say that sex work is not criminalized, only third party and client is criminalized. But it's not true. By the law, sex work is still being criminalized. And in addition, so that when the client and third party, just like what I say, the example, any agent, any people help the sex worker is criminalized, is make the sex worker is not able to operate. And this is affects so many levels. One is actually why the police can come in, why the people being arrested, detained, and deported is because the criminal law actually make them become illegal, or make the criminal system can enter their life that endangers their life, right? So that no matter you at the beginning frame that as a victim, so Butterfly have published a report called Behind the Rescue, so that before the sex worker is being criminalized, say that you're the bad woman, sex work is the bad thing, you should not do it. But now, because sex worker movement was successful in the last 20 years, they push back. Now they do not say I criminalize sex worker, right? They say I criminalize trafficking. And we criminalize the perpetrator and the violence against women. They frame the client as violence against sex worker. So that is make more people do not see the real picture. Actually, the criminalization is still come from the moralistic view. think that sex work is bad need to be controlled and need to be ending of this industry. And then the criminalization is so powerful to bring in the policing, surveillance to shut down the business. And because sex work is being criminalized, so many anti-trafficking groups and sex work groups, they say, no, we are not criminalized sex worker, but it's not true. Any place, if you work there because client is illegal, so that the place is become a scene of the crime, right? So that like the landlord can kick you away, and then the police is using like the investigation of anti-trafficking to investigate. But again, who is being arrested is the worker themselves supporting each other is being arrested, right? You can see who is being arrested. Many women themselves is a sex worker or ex-sex worker is being arrested, or the people connect with the sex worker being arrested, right? And also the client. And all this measure is just make the sex worker be more marginalized. As we say, client is important support system, but now client is being criminalized. The good client is hesitate and not able to offer the information. It is difficult for screening, but also difficult for the client give the support to the worker. And so, but because of that beautiful name of protecting the woman, make the people do not see the real picture. So that's why Butterfly is calling for the full decriminalization. It's not just decriminalization, because we see the anti-sex worker group, they appropriate this language, right? That we found that they're so powerful. They say, they call themselves abolitionists. They call themselves like a support decriminalization of women, right? But it's not true. The full decriminalization of sex work, including clients, third party, and sex worker. So in the Ontario court, the sex worker, there is the judgment already say criminalization of sex work is unconstitutional. So this is aligned with the Bedford case of the Supreme Court case. But what we see in Ontario and many cities, the police still using anti-trafficking as the excuse, but they still enforcing this criminal law, to against the sex worker. And because sex work being criminalized, of course, it's increased the stigma, right? And also we enforce the anti-sex work hate because they're being seen as crime, right? And also it's also give the strong initiative to shut down all the massage parlor, because massage parlor being associated with sex work. So that's an impact is huge. So that's why what we call for is the full decriminalization of sex work.
I think people are probably already getting the impression from our panel that all of the things we want to talk about, like Scholar Strike is the perfect place to play this, right? To have this conversation, and especially at this time, because we're here talking about labor rights. We're here talking, not to list all of the topics we want to talk about, but Elaine just brought up so many things and how they're connected that really we need like a day to break down each of these, like minimum 90 minutes, actually a semester, to cover all of this and how it's related, but how it's related to prison abolition, how when we're talking about criminalized people, and this is why it's related to all of the other topics that are on Scholar Strike, because we're talking about criminalization of Black people, criminalization of undocumented people, of poor people, just the criminalization of people trying to figure out how to survive, and how that feeds into prison system. And that's why we talk about prison abolition and how it's related to this. And then Elaine bringing up all of this, the point of it, of criminalization, it's not just to control, also to be the entry point so that we can come in and say, show us your documents, and then now on an immigration level as well. It's also a way, control these bodies, police these bodies, but to use it to do the stigma. Because as long as there's stigma coming down, then people who even would be on our side or see, I was there at the Supreme Court. So the Bedford case, you're in the Supreme Court and I'm listening, and anyone the facts are so plain that absolutely on this side, we have human rights, harm reduction. It's so simple. And over here we have, and who is showing up for this? So religious groups, abolitionist groups, and really to call yourself abolitionist, to, like Elaine said, co-opt this word, feminists who want to come without check where your understanding came from. It didn't come from listening to people who are in the sex trade. It also didn't come necessarily from people who have experienced being trafficked in levels of this. But often that story is stolen, co-opted to use against. So sitting there listening to this, it's so simple. And I thought there's no way we can't win, And I thought I was the naive one, being so optimistic, but boom, we won. Absolutely. Every single one shut down. And for a moment, sex work was decriminalized, as it should be, as it is becoming in other countries, nations, in this world. But then all of it, the moral agenda, and it's based on this stigma, and people just not understanding yet that this is why we're having this conversation. It's why I'm still, again, kind of fueled. I'm back in that optimistic place, this moment in this movement. You know, horrible tragedies that prompted this current focus. But look, now we're rallying also with our Asian organizing communities, and it's always been tied and related. And so we're here to, maybe you don't know how to use this language or where, and it seems complex to you, but that's why we're here. So like, connect with us again, and we'll plug all those spots for you. It won't just happen in 90 minutes. Like, I mean, I'm thinking everything Elaine just dropped, it's gonna take hearing it multiple times, but we'll list you the articles, places to read. Just go to Butterfly, read the reports. It's gonna come across very straightforward when you open and learn.
Yeah, and I want to add some examples. So one of the example is like when there is a worker being murdered, so that all the friend is come forward, you know, try to provide the information because she has been assaulted and sexual assault by a perpetrator and her ex-partner. So, but what happened? The police, instead of investigate the reason of her death, the perpetrator, they investigate, all the friend come forward, and then they ask why she's here, right? So, and also like at who is renting the place for her. So this all turned into the criminal investigation of the network. And the other thing, I really need to name the organization. So for example, when you talk about abolitionist anti-policing movement, so for example, Abolitionist Legal Network Clinic is the big advocate of anti-policing. But then like the trafficking give the language, and then even then they are support the policing for Bill 251. So the Anti-Trafficking Act actually is expanding the police power. So the other organization is called Elizabeth-Fry. Many of them, you know that they support the women in prison. I hear that they say, oh, they're doing the work is help the woman to remove the criminal record. And we ask why you advocate for women to remove the criminal record. Why you don't advocate that the people will not get criminal charge at the very beginning? Why you advocate at the parliament to criminalize this woman when you work with the woman in prison, right? So this is so important message. I know anyone listen here, connect with Elizabeth Fry, you know, that is something they really need to revisit, right? That the survival is rely on the woman. If no woman, they do not have funding to support them, right? But why you produce the system and support the criminalization of women, right? So, and I think that is why that system is so powerful, and because it makes so many people support the criminalization and also support like the policing, right? Criminalization and policing cannot like completely separate. And criminalization, what we want to say is not only criminal law, but now the bylaw, even the Ontario Act, so many level is the law and policy used to police and control the sex worker. I'm so sorry I interrupt. So
it's time to revisit. It's time to revisit. I hear Mercedes.
I just wanted to speak to what Elaine and Mina are saying here around criminalization and decriminalization. I think a lot of sex workers are prison abolitionists, not that other kind of abolition. And I think given just the really astute analysis that Elaine and Nina have given us in terms, or Mina have given us in terms of these interlocking, overlapping systems, it is clear that the police do not protect us. It is clear that it is we who protect us. And when we think about who it is that is doing sex work, who are often victims of violence, there are also other populations that the police, that the state is trying to control.
Would you like to think that through Mercedes, I'm just trying to think about how to extend the analysis that you're providing into what the connections are to those other populations. I don't know if you'd like to say a little bit more about that. Yeah.
Well, just like speaking to my my own experience of sex work, a lot of the women that I worked with were Indigenous, not all, of course, but the women were all poor. A lot of them had substance abuse disorders, and we see that in the downtown east side and many other places, that a lot of folks who have substance abuse disorders have a comorbid mental illness. So what we see, or what I have seen in the downtown east side, is disabled women, mentally ill women, Indigenous women, being victims of violent crimes, of murder in the darkest situations. I think, and at the time that I was working, there was a person that was actively killing women from the neighborhood. And unfortunately, that person is not the first person, and distressingly may not be the last. I think if we go across the border to the States, we see that there have also been women that have been targeted. We see that a lot of, again, low income women with mental illnesses and disabilities, women trying to support their families, a lot of Black women working in that trade. So when I see who it is that's working in the survival sex trade, that's where I have experience. I can't speak to other places, but I think about those intersecting kinds of oppressions that folks are dealing with. And just to speak to my own experience, what I think that the police and the RCMP were aware of what was going on in the time that I was working. Certainly the community knew and shared information. And what resulted, in fact, was the largest criminal investigation in Canadian history, millions of dollars spent mining this gruesome forensic evidence that folks wanted to then fucking talk about endlessly in the media. Sorry, I'm going on now. But so I see these intersections: mentally ill people, disabled people, Black women, indigenous women, women of color, poor women, women who have experienced complex traumas. These are the folks that I see being managed by the police, the prison industrial complex, the justice system. So that is why I think that a lot of sex workers are prison abolitionists. They're not focused on all sex work being sex trafficking. They're focused on sex work as a form of labor with, as Elaine and Mina were saying, networks of mutual aid.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's very much connection between prison abolition and sex working.
Mercedes, thank you so much for that. And we were indeed going to talk about prison abolition next, but I wonder if, before we go there, if Nina and Amina and Elaine might like to weigh in on the work of coalition building and solidarity. I know that this was something we had talked about on Saturday morning, and Mina, I know that you have thoughts about this. Elaine, you may have thoughts as well. I think it will be really, I think it's really useful and important to have this discussion.
Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, I can feel my heart beating. I can see it. I mean, it's here. I can see how much pain you're holding. You can just imagine how much pain, like how our communities, this is why we need practices of healing and organizing like this together. This, us meeting, us hanging out before, having this conversation here, whether people hear it or not, what they're going to do with it later, hopefully join us. And this is that gravitational pull I talked about that I learned from Mia Mingus. How you brought up, this is a disability rights and justice issue also. These are all so related. So yeah, and especially after talking about Indigenous people being targeted, I'd love to take a moment, because when we talk about migrant rights, especially migrant Asian sex workers being targeted by social services, by state, by immigration, under the guise of anti-trafficking, which really is anti-prostitution. And it's been it's imperialist even, it's decolonial to be about decriminalization of sex work. Could have a whole day talking about that and that relationship. And this is why when we want to talk to our communities who are organizing around anti-Asian violence, please, you have to center the voices of, what did someone say? It was so great yesterday. Who are the coldest penguins? Who are the coldest penguins in Asian communities right now? And careful when you have this conversation, how you're going to focus about what part of anti-Asian racism are we going to talk about and focus. I could bring up so many of my personal experiences, but I would rather like to put someone else in the center right now. And the things that I want to say to community and to organizing and to say to center within our Asian anti-racism discussion, those who are affected by being criminalized, I want to talk about all the other criminalized bodies. And you cannot talk about anti-trafficking initiatives without talking about Indigenous people specifically being targeted since such a long time ago by this particular form of state violence, plus countless so many others. Thank you for bringing so much emotion and feeling really in this, because we can't just talk about this here. This is such a reality. And so if I can just take up space instead, I'm just going to read the words. Everything I want to say has already been said. Like, so much of what we can bring into this fight now, we've been learning from people already on these movements, and that includes especially Indigenous people who've also been organizing. In this particular, so I'm just going to read this piece. And if we're talking about radical organizing and how we want to be radical about that and what voices to bring in and who to consider and risks, this just, to talk about what communities left out of the discussion, I think this is just one way we radically center criminalized identities. So this is a statement from the Indigenous Sex Sovereignty Collective. I'll just read pieces. I very much encourage people to read the rest, to also check out and see how you can work with, or not work with. What do they want and need? Ask and support. Also the Native Youth Sexual Health Network. Okay, so this is their statement. And so to put it in the context, okay. This is a statement from the Indigenous Sex Sovereignty Collective to Indigenous anti-violence organizers, asking them to center the voices of people who trade or sell sex in Indigenous communities. So, which is basically exactly what we're here trying to ask our Asian organizing communities to do. But it's already been said perfectly, so how about I just repeat these words? And just to see how, because it is parallel, and if we don't support this fight, okay. People who trade or sell sex are often left out of anti-violence advocacy and are spoken for rather than being invited to share their own perspectives and experiences. This exclusion is unacceptable. People who trade or sell sex, especially trans two-spirit sex workers and two-spirit sex workers, need to be invited wherever violence against Indigenous people is discussed in order to ensure solutions are shaped by their needs and experiences. I'm gonna skip ahead. Organizations that stigmatize sex workers' lives are not safe or welcoming for sex workers. For sex workers' voices to be truly heard, communities need to build environments in which people who have previously or are currently trading or selling sex are respected, valued, and seen as experts in their own lives. This means addressing stigma against sex work and creating stronger relationships among sex workers, their families, and wider communities. We must not forget that people in the sex trade, sex industries, and street economies and their families and allies have been integral to anti-violence movements across Turtle Island. And this parallels here as well, and I bet we'll get into this more. This leadership and community building must be respected as we remember their histories in organizing and mobilizing. In anti-violence organizing, we have observed that state-led responses, new laws, increased policing, social services, are frequently seen as the best or only way to create change. Really echoing everything Elena's already said. We instead call for solutions that address personal violence, such as targeted murders and disappearances, as well as systemic and legal violence, such as that perpetrated through the actions of police, social workers, and the judiciary in maintaining colonial power relations. It's designed to maintain colonial power relations. We call for solutions that move away from protectionist or rescue-oriented policies and practices adopted by colonial governments. Turning away from colonial policies, we must instead value, respect, again, center the diverse voices of Indigenous people with experience trading or selling sex. Without these voices and perspectives, any efforts to reduce violence in our communities only contribute to the ongoing marginalization of sex workers. This, we say, is unacceptable. So this is paralleling what we're asking for. And the fight is so aligned.
Yeah, and I think that,
So important,
no, go ahead, sorry.
Just to say again and make the point, and I can give so many examples of this, how sex workers, you just might not know it because of stigma, because of being in the background, but have always been at the forefront of movements against gender-based violence, AIDS Coalition, so many. Prison abolition, like Mercedes already said, LGBT grassroots, everything, really queer, everything, but invisibilized. And why? Because of stigma. Well, it's time we can move beyond this now. What were you going to say, Elaine?
Yeah, I just wanted to give the example. So, for example, the recent new Anti-Trafficking Act, Ontario Anti-Trafficking Act Bill 251 actually is what you just say, right? So that they say they are anti-trafficking, they're trying to protect the traffic victim. So, and then, but all the bill is about increased policing, and we should not forget who are the major a perpetrator of the violence against sex workers and racialized people. Is police and law enforcement are the major source of violence. So, and across the country. So there is a lot of evidence to show that. But that, for example, the bill is giving the power of police can go to the hotel, get all the record of client with the warrant, and they can have the inspector enter any place, anytime, to look at any record, and also they have the power to detain the youth for 12 hours without like any evidence. It's again the example how the policing is using social worker work together. But because this is framed as protecting the victim, no one speaks against it. So even so many people see this bill is so harmful. So even the NDP will say that they cannot vote against this bill, and some even will both support it because they don't want to perceive it supporting the youth engaged in sex work, right? So this is so make it so difficult to push back because they just create this illusion. This is same as the residential school, right? So that no one will deny that the children should have the clean water, should have the shelter, should access education. But the name of protection is actually covering like all the massive killing, all the violence in that system, right? So that instead of like putting the youth in the childcare system is so harmful, we need to ask why so many youth think that the brothel is safer than the childcare system. What actually happened, right? So and I think what you say is so important, but we can see actually in this like political power imbalance, like the sex worker voice is not being heard, like the racialized people not being heard, and I want to follow up with the allies building piece. And I think for Butterfly doing the organizing, there is like few stage. So at the beginning, so we're trying to help the society understand the issue of migrant sex worker facing, right? So that's why Butterfly is being a lot of allyship, so that as Mina said, so Workers' Action Center, the workers' rights and migrant rights come to support the sex worker movement. But actually we want to see is not like this. It's as you guys just said, sex worker is in every movement. So every movement should also include sex worker. But what we see, so for example, at the beginning, when we really want to find the activists to support the workers, they have been abused by the massage, at the massage parlor worker abused by the law enforcement. The first question is asked, are they sex worker? So what does it mean? So that if they are the legitimate massage workers, so they will feel more comfortable to advocate for them, right? If they are sex work. So that is a kind of hesitation that they think that it's difficult to support them. It's being perceived as like they are supporting trafficker, you know. So this is, again, is keep happening. So that's why when you say coalition building, is very important to see sex work is part of any community. They are part of any movement. They also should have the leadership in those movements, because we can see they are the most marginalized. So the example is like now the anti-Asian racism campaign. We see this panel, so many conferences all over the country say anti-Asian racism is an important issue. Anti-Asian hate is an important issue. But we are so disappointed in so many platforms. Sex worker voice is being dismissed. The massage parlor worker voice is being dismissed. So even the murder do not only kill the woman because they are Asian. It's very clear that the murder killed that 6 Asian massage parlor worker is because they are the worker in massage parlor. It's because of the homophobia, because of the anti-sex work hate. So that's why so many Asian group now is get so much resources, so much attention on the anti-Asian hate. They should not forget that they are the Asian community, is part of your community that you need to advocate for. And as Mina and some of you say, when you talk about anti-Asian racism, you should not forget, now have so many massage parlors still being targeted in Canada. So many Asian and migrant sex workers also being murdered in Canada. So I think this is a very, very important message. So this is the allyship building, and this is about the movement that like sex worker and massage parlor workers should be like in every movement. And this is like, for example, Bill 251, this is not only the campaign of sex workers. So this is the issue of abolitionists. So this is an issue of like anti-policing movement. So, and also racial justice. So like also the agenda of everyone.
Elaine, whoa, that is what an extraordinary, just a beautiful, important analysis. Thank you so much. It's just so extraordinarily generous and brilliant and right. And I think it's really important, you know, for those of us who are doing work around, you know, anti-Asian hate right now, to recognize this profound debt, actually, to sex workers broadly. I think really, really, really important. I think also what you said around the way in which the concept of protection is used to perpetuate the violence, and that there's a kind of reverberance of violence through this term that's supposed to put a stop to it. That's really, really important to recognize how that term gets politicized. So, oh my gosh, thank
Can I
you.
shout out?
Yeah.
Shout out to Red Canary Song, who, can you imagine in a moment of that kind of mourning, what it was like to have to manage that kind of influx of everybody? Like, this is the shift that we're now seeing. Not every article, opinion piece, organization, they jumped on this to talk about anti-Asian hate, and some knew, and it's not because they knew, it was with the guidance of Red Canary Song. Talk about generosity and the debt owed. How much in a moment of grieving they needed to labor to rush out also statements. So when you're looking for articles, or notice which ones you did read based on the recent violence, and it was not the first time a massage place was targeted because of horophobia and anti-sex work sentiments, not the first time, but first time on a big national, and it became in the media, so other people, what we've already been fighting. So I Red Canary Song already existed, right? It didn't develop out of. So just shout out to them for that kind of work and labor that they did do. So when you look for articles, make sure, did that article, did that news somebody, did they get a quote from the perspective of Butterfly? You'll see Elaine's name in there. Did they get someone from Red Canary Song to say, if not, huge gap and missing, and let us ensure that this gap isn't missing again. And if you don't know how to have that conversation, maybe this is the first time. It's coming to you, just like maybe mutual aid came to you for the first time, this concept as a way of doing your political organizing because of the pandemic. Okay, and now the shift is moving, and this is that moment, and to make that shift, and fear not, and we will help you like we've been doing. And we've always been in all of the movements, but as stigma decreases, maybe now people will be able to say they're out there. And it's not, like, sex work has been resistance. So if you want to talk about resistance movements, of course it's always been aligned and workers have always been in there. As queer people, as young people, especially as queer young people of color, my goodness, as trans women, this has been a mode of survival and also resistance. It's a political act in itself. And if I could just say a quick, did you want to move on?
No, there was something that you had raised on Saturday that I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to speak to. Could you talk about lessons learned from Black women in particular? Because was something you'd spoken quite passionately and articulately about when we talked on Saturday, and I didn't want to let that slide.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this ties into what was just said. I think we can stress also, as you write, as you speak to the violence that happened, one wants to not just be careful to say that that actor, that violence wasn't targeted just because those women were Asian. It was gender-based violence, and specifically horophobia, anti-sex violence. So the same conversation, people being careful not to say, it's not just about, well, it's racist to think that they were sex workers or had anything to do with sexuality or even putting a sexual gaze on them. That is a racist act. Yes, absolutely. But be careful not to just say, not all Asian women, not all massage workers are. So do not, because we're not whores, careful, because some people are workers, sex workers, work in sex trade. Don't throw them under the bus. And to me, it just parallels the same way that Black feminists and organizers have been saying, the answer is not to desexualize or, what is it, like victim blaming Black women. If you are a sexual woman, then that is why. And the way to get away from this is to reduce this and not create them as, not make yourself a target. Be careful not to create that distancing and in that way throwing people under the bus. And if you do that to Asian people now out of respectability politics, to try to distance, to say, no, we're the good Asians, then you are repeating that exact targeted argument to Black women. If you say that to Asian women, then you are repeating what has been said and what people have been fighting against.
Thank you for that.
And I want to follow up what Mina just said, is because we also need to be careful that when we look at the anti-Asian hate or anti-racism, the intersectionality, who is affected most, right? So that people being affected differently because of the class, economic status, and also their background, their work, right? So that's why, as Mina said, we should not flow away them from the bus, but we're so disappointed, like after the murder. So Butterfly was being invited by like different organizations, but when we call for their support, they disappear, right? So that we are being taken in the way that is showing that, we're concerned, but when we asking for like decriminalization, asking for not policing, they shut up. And we also need to look at like how Asian community is affected by colonialization, and particularly in Canada, a lot of like community leader, they are Christian, right? So they are also have that kind of moralistic agenda. So that's why I think this is need a lot of work, how to not only push the society outside, to recognize the sex worker rights, but how to have like more critical push of like Asian organization to be more supportive, to eliminate that homophobia within and I think the sexualization of the woman piece, we see so many activists and also scholars say Asian women should not be sexualized, but we need to be careful, just like Mina said, what are they trying to create the hate of sex workers, trying to differentiate I'm the good woman, I'm not the bad woman, they should not be, associated, or we really see that they are the part of the community need to be advocate for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Elaine.
Not
That's
desexualize
so
us.
important. Yeah, so well said. So much
And
work
imagine,
to do within our own communities. Mina, I'm so sorry. I want to make sure that we get to the topic of prison abolition before we run out of time. Would that be okay?
of course,
Um,
if I can just make one quick statement.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Go.
Vision moment. Imagine we can be leaders too.
Of course.
Yes,
And you
not
are. And you are.
all, but to say, yes, not all Asian women, like don't desexualize us. Not all Asian women are sex workers, yes. But can all Asian people stand for sex workers? Why can't that happen? That's how it should be. This is the vision. This is what to learn, to move towards, to organize around.
Thank you. So important. Yeah, so important. Thank you. Could we return to this? Oh, Mercedes, I'm imagining you'd like to go there. So could we return to the topic of prison abolition and connect it to the violence of anti-sex trafficking? I think that was where we had hoped to go.
Well, I do want to as well speak to Red Canary Song's statement after the murders of these folks in Atlanta. And one part of it that particularly stayed with me was the thoughtful and nuanced way that they addressed increased calls for policing, that some Asian Americans were calling for that the police felt that would be a strategy. So I really appreciated the fact that they acknowledged their understanding of why some Asian American people would call for that increased policing, but at the same time, they could not call for that was not, in fact, what it was that sex workers needed. So right in their statement addressing these brutal anti-Asian hate crimes, they address the police, calls to the police.
Right.
So again, I think so many sex workers are, in fact, prison abolitionists. And many of us, I should say I am not active in the trade at this time. I think that many of us are agents, and this idea of protection by the police, again, is ridiculous because they do not protect us, they harm us. And of course, police are how the prisons are filled. There's a direct role there. Yeah, so I mean, I think there are conversations already occurring around prison abolition, but I am certainly hoping that we can keep going with that conversation. And I hope that folks will take the time to meditate a bit on how it is that, or what kinds of knowledge, strategies, and practices that sex workers have been working with that they can bring to other movements.
Elaine, do you want to say something there before I?
Please, yeah, please. Mina.
Okay.
Elaine, yeah.
Elaine, did you want to say something there?
Okay.
I really like what you're saying there too, Mercedes. I mean, I love everything you say. I'm so glad to be here, seeing you and having this conversation and making these connections that maybe to us are, and of course, maybe to some people are a first time, maybe to some people are a, well, we've known, but how do we go there? But how will we do? How will we speak for, with? And just to frame this, it's not, this is a perfect place to frame this. It's not just workers need you, sex workers need you, migrant workers need you, need the movement. Yes, but also we've been there. Not only have you been able to access our knowledge and strategies, you need us. I think I don't want that to get missed. You know, when people don't know how to talk about, but what about happens after prison abolition?
Mm.
Oh, so you mean how do communities take care of themselves and each other? How do concepts of safety within communities happen? Guess what? Workers have been doing that out of necessity again. You can learn from these knowledges, experiences, strategies to
Well,
fold into greater community accountability, transformative justice, and this restorative justice, transformative justice. Again, to speak back to Indigenous people, where do you think we learned those things from? Just like we need the traditional teachings and knowledge and experiences and ways of surviving since colonization that we all need to also learn from, to listen to for everyone's greater liberation. You better make space for those movements or we're all going to suffer from. And I think it's the same thing. I mean, prison abolition being just one example of how our politics are tied to through decriminalization, absolutely. How Mercedes said, like criminalization is how you get people to that prison pipeline.
Mhm.
And if we're not going to talk about carceral and punitive and punishment, well, how are we going to take care of ourselves? Yes, there are other ways, and ways to protect, prevent, harm reduce, and then what happens afterwards. Also, again, practices that have been being put in place that you can learn from. I mean, the list of things I can also list for what you can benefit from. There's so many different places that, again, out of necessity and also because of experience, that sex workers can bring this experience and knowledge to the table in organizing community and just not even if you're an organizer, everybody, so many ways. Are you an entrepreneur? Here are great. You want to talk about hustle? Workers are hustlers, know how to, with less means, with less resources. Also in terms of, are difficulty talking about having sex? Guess what workers have had to work through? Issues, their own personal issues with, oh my God, sex, let alone issues with economics, capitalism, money, making money, the uncomfortability of that, what to do when you have money and the person next to you doesn't, how to deal with, these are things that we work out in practice, not just theory or learning or listening from, but out of practice and figuring out and fumbling, learning through, and then sharing these knowledges with each other. Issues with men, relationships with men, these are things like knowledges we can bring from experience and share. It's why Elaine and I, shout out to ACAS last week, the Asian Community Aid Services, who had us come in for their Pillow Talk event to teach a workshop representing Butterfly about the transformative power of pleasure. We can bring these knowledges and experiences, and we can do it in a way that's fun and healing. It doesn't have to just be like the struggles and the yes, but when every day is a struggle, you better do it with some comedy, some joy, some laughter, some food, relationship building, friendship, ways that we can't just cut each other down because we need to live another day. Too many ideas and they're all over.
I think this is amazing, and I think that is like go to the next issue we want to discuss, like how the anti-trafficking movement is so successful to push back so many movements, right? So like the one what you mentioned about the liberation of the sexuality of women, but they are like putting the moralistic agenda, under the anti-trafficking, that to push back, like sex is about fear, sex is about exploitation, so that like when your sex is not in family, that is like everything is harmful, is dangerous. And we always ask why sex is no problem when you have money become the issue, right? So that and I think that is like how the moralistic agenda, and they also use it to push back the abolitionist movement, right? So, and we say that, I don't call them before, they call them abolitionists, they call them like incarcerated feminists. I don't call them feminists because they love police more than women. So they are the anti-sex work organization, they hate the sex worker, right? But they are so successful. We see that even some violence against women organization, they know from their family violence experience that the criminal system is not the solution. but they are still part of that anti-trafficking circle, to support all this harmful policy. It's because there are so many money like controlling them, and this is nonprofit industrial complex. You see $300 million go to anti-trafficking, that all the organization now they frame everyone homeless, everyone sex worker becomes a traffic victim in order to support the work. And that's how this machine keep producing. And then, as I said, that how the social service and law enforcement work together. It is a shame for the Ontario Social Work Association. They invite the police to train the social worker about how to support the victim of trafficking. This is a shame. So this is a shame of Peel Region, who is leading the anti-trafficking initiative is the police, right? So that's the police can become the hero by taking up the anti-trafficking movement and push back the different police movement and abolitionist movement, because then they become the hero. Even people do not see they are the solution of mental health issue. They do not see that they're the solution of the violence issue. When it comes to trafficking, that they become the hero. They can get so much resources, money, and power again. So that's why any violence against women organization, any human rights organization should not support that, right? So that the real abolitionists should not support this kind of anti-trafficking initiative. But why they are so successful, right? So even the NDP politicians, they are big on different police, big on anti-policing, but they still support this bill, right? So that I think that's why we really need to uncover it. And I need to name the organization. So there's some of the organization, how they do the policing differently. For example, in Toronto, Canadian Women Foundation in 2012, they are the big advocate of to have imposed the control of the massage parlor in Toronto. So after that, the police and law enforcement come to the massage parlor to ask the woman to take off the clothes to show their underwear. If they have the sexy underwear, they will say they're the sex worker. They give a lot of tickets and shut them down. When there is the anti-trafficking organization, they claim they care about the violence of the woman. They keep silence of that and keep calling more and more policing. And one worker received 5 tickets a day, right? So, and also the workers being ordered to dance, to sing, and they keep silence. But the shutdown massage parlor is not stopping. So in 2018, Center to End Human Trafficking again, so that they come in there, the white feminists, not feminists, white anti-sex worker woman that is like doing lobbying, because before the consultation, they already can connect the mayor so that to work with the media and politicians to shut down the massage parlor. And what happened now is Newmarket. Again, we see this like anti-trafficking group and police and very racist politicians, how they work together, to shut down the business. But then what is the name? One is they frame that is illegal. You see, these women do not have credential. They do not know how to do massage skills because they do not go to massage school, that they do not have this credential, that they are illegal. But on the same time, they say, these women speak a little bit English. They must be trafficked. We need to do something. So that to make like so powerful to bring in law enforcement, but at the same time shut down the business. So this is a very, we call it racist attack. So that is like killing the industry, killing the people, and make people be more dangerous. But we are unfortunately see so many of this organization got huge funding, but we are so disappointed many violence against women organization keep silence of that. Many people in abolitionist movement, silence of that. So that's why so many people in anti-Asian movement, they keep silence when the Asian massage parlor being shut down, right? So that's why I said this is so important to include like the sex worker movement and massage parlor movement in order this movement. This is also their issue. They should not join as the ally. This is their people. They should like advocate for that. So this is just like the example how bloody this organization is harmful. I also need to name other organizations called Defend Dignity. They even produce a manual to teach you how to lobby the city to shut down the massage parlor. So again, they are the leader of this organization have the law enforcement background. They got huge funding, but in the mission is very clear. Their purpose is ending sex work, but they will not get a lot of support, right? But That's why in all the publication and all the message, they say anti-trafficking, right? So that's why they get so much support.
Lean, thank you. Wow, what an incredible analysis. So important. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for that. Friends, we've been cycling through the conversation around the violence of anti-sex sex trafficking, as well as sex worker rights as labor rights. But is there more that you would like to say on these two subjects? Or shall we move towards the close? We're hoping to talk about pleasure a little bit. And we had also wanted to make some direct asks to our communities. So those are the things on my mind. Where would you like to go?
Yeah, I just want to network like the pleasure piece and also how sex work actually is so powerful, or work in massage parlor is so powerful for many workers. So
Yeah.
what I've done a lot of research, but one of the example is like instead of washing the dish every day or cutting the meat every day, working in massage parlor or sex industry is really make the worker feel more connected to the society. They can use the expertise, and also very interesting, very important that what the worker feel about the work, they feel very fulfilling by that they feel they are helping other people. No matter offering the massage, help the people relieve the pain or make the people feel respect or being cared. And I think this is a very powerful, fulfilling part is missing. And also that how sex work and massage is so fun, and there is a lot of creativity in the work, and I think this part is also missing. And also we have some workers said that they never get any orgasm, you know, with their ex-partner, but in sex work they even can have like different partner to have different adventure. That how many workers actually tell you that they, because of the influence by like the concept of the sexuality idea, they never been naked even in front of the mirror. But how do sex work that make them feel about proud of the body, and the feeling of being wanted, that is the desired. And I think that is so powerful, but that is also missing, and also sometimes is being seen as the bad thing, right? Like women being sexualized, but actually for some people that is a powerful way that you feel attracted, you feel being wanted, and I think this is also a very powerful sign is being missing. But of course, is again the other sign is how economic social status can be changed, and that how sex work actually is a very powerful way for many workers resist of the capitalism, right? If you are the migrant, you don't speak the language, that is how racism play out, that you only allowed to work in some low pay job, or like the work is just repetitive, you know, like, but then sex work and massage parlor actually give the good economic opportunity. They can like move to different social level, and also the children. And also I think that is something also important to mention. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Arlene. Mina or Mercedes, would you like to speak to the pleasure to pleasure?
Mina?
I mean, I could speak on that for a long time. If I can just say one quick note to make sure I don't, you know, as much as I want to say, like, don't erase our voices, especially when they've been screaming. It's even when you do repeat it, to notice how. I want to make sure not to make it seem like we're minimizing other people's voices too.
Yes.
You know, we want people to know that when you see anti-trafficking, what they're really seeing is anti-sex work. That's not to say that people aren't in complex situations. We don't care about them receiving the support that they need and how they want it also. But we're here to say that actually within sex work communities, we might have the most access to hearing those stories, those experiences, and being able to give that support and care, again, perhaps through mutual aid, perhaps through these other safety measures that we can provide ourselves. And also to say that the way these anti-trafficking organizations have been trying to do their work, it isn't always the most effective to reach those communities or help people looking for those services anyway. With this extra focus on exiting sex work, is that really your focus anyway on supporting anyone who has been in a difficult position? You know, I've been in those meetings and they wanted to give me like a consent lesson that actually was very ineffective. Sex workers can teach you much better. It's something that we do too, to teach you about consent and consent for real, the complexity of it, what comes in the way, what is the layer of how does trauma impact your ability to be present in that moment, receive the person in front of you, the communication skills involved. Again, from practice and practical skills, we can talk to this and teach other greater communities, including youth. Oh my goodness, the fear of a sex worker, teaching youth about consent. Imagine in a world where, of course, these skills are valued, recognized, experienced, brought in, used beneficially. Don't say that the reason young people are vulnerable too is because they have low self-esteem. Really? What young person doesn't have low self-esteem? It's economics, it's money, it's because of poverty. Can we address poverty? And absolutely look at it through a lens of what sex workers know about poverty? We can tell you about this. Don't put how victim blaming, don't put it on this and then give me an ineffective consent workshop and not actually give me, say, a really good job.
Right.
Or tell me I need to go work in retail when I have so many other skills, but maybe these other layers that factor in that you can't deal with, the disability rights issue, that I'm disabled, that's why I'm here, that these things, that's why I'm here, the time that you need. And then yes, absolutely, we can talk so much about pleasure and healing. Like when we did our workshop recently, the point of talking about pleasure was because for the point of healing. Our communities, our society, I don't mean we're traumatized and not traumatized from the experience of sex work, like Elaine talked about. Sometimes it is the way to access enough money for therapy, community, time to go to school, to learn about trauma, to learn about healing, to then bring it back, because we know mutual aid and sharing, bring it back to our communities in ways that really work outside of a clinical setting, so we can think about how to make it accessible, because we're always thinking about how to make it accessible for the coldest penguins in the middle. No matter how much access, benefit we gain, learn, become professors, become published. I mean, I don't want to out Mercedes' personal stories, but the things Mercedes told me about ways that she, because of being politicized and understanding and seeing, like you saw how much feeling, that doesn't just leave you. When you manage to exit, come out, gain access other ways, you come back for, you give to, you're here talking, you give time to me, you give to Butterfly. You write the work that you do, the published works that you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gal. Thank you.
Mercedes.
Well,
Yeah.
I was. Thank you so much, Gal. I think one thing I think that's really, my thoughts are going to be a bit loose here, but one thing I think that's really interesting about pleasure is I think there's this idea that we sex workers are not supposed to have that when with the client, and that if one does, then there's something wrong there, or at least that's the sense that I had. And I feel like this idea around pleasure in some ways connects to this idea of good and bad Asians, or good and bad whomevers, and this idea of innocence, right? So some of us, it's our lifestyle choices, and the reason we end up disappeared or murdered is because of the lifestyle choices we made. So we are guilty, we are implicated in our own, in the acts of violence against us. But then from the police perspective of anti-trafficking, those folks that are trafficked are innocent. And I'm not saying that trafficking doesn't exist, but this collapse of all sex work as trafficking is just ridiculous. But yeah, I think that thinking about the aspect of pleasure in sex work does make me think about these ideas of good and bad folks and guilty or innocent folks. Somehow that seems to really tie into the idea of pleasure and who gets to have it and in what specific context. So a lot of morality and ethical stuff that is not ours coming into that.
That is not ours. I have a question to every audience viewer out there who, like, this has brought up all kinds of things. We talked about money, oh my God, with sex. Now we're talking about pleasure, Like, you might not have been able to absorb all these things. I get it. Lots of triggering topics. Lots, because who doesn't have triggers around, hello, being in this society that doesn't know how to deal with being a sexual being? How much, not ours, how much do you think of this fight everything is not just projected onto us? People's discomfort with their own bodies existing at all, with their own pleasure, with their own sexuality, with their own just fun or life that isn't even about work, work, work. I'm not here to try to even fight for more equal work. I'm here to fight for less work. Work is such a problem in itself.
Friends,
Being
we're
of value, being enough without all of the work.
No kidding. I hear you on that, Mina. I hear you. Friends, we're running out of time, and I wonder if you might just like to close with thoughts around how to direct our organizing communities to always include people, so always include sex workers, always include people who trade in sex in our movements. Would you each like to sort of have a little go at that? And then we'll have to say goodbye for now, but I hope that there'll be many more chances for us to get together again and to speak.
If you're not a sex worker, you need to listen. You need to not be speaking, or if the speaking that you're going to be doing is asking questions and being sensitive and thoughtful and asking those questions. But the role of non-sex workers is to listen.
If you are a sex worker and you've been watching, go badass. I bet you've been dealing, I hope you're not isolated. I hope you have friends in this. We're your friends in this. There are ways also to participate and be anonymous. Like this is why Asian leadership also important. There are ways to do this organizing and be anonymous. You don't have to out yourself. All young queer people should not just go outing themselves. You know, doesn't have to be the mainstream way to do things too. And then just asking, like, you are of so much value. And how can we leverage, you know, these different, very different experiences? Like, what a spectrum. We couldn't even cover how much of the spectrum. I hope we stressed that enough. We didn't, you can never. But how can we leverage these very different and collective experiences for these greater fights and battles that we're in? How do we work together? You know, we brought up the prison abolition, racial fight across for Indigenous people, all of this. When we're fighting for queer rights, when we're fighting for disability rights. Our lens, our perspective, it adds so much to this. And even if they don't know how to value yet, I think that tide is turning. I'm gonna stay optimistic. I'm gonna ask to be invited in. Please invite me in. We've spoken at so many things. George Brown Labor Fair, we can speak there. And to organizers, oh my goodness. Oh, Elaine, you're on mute, so I'm gonna steal your moment. To organizers out there, because I can't say this enough, it's time to, I know you're scared, but we'll hold your hand, we'll give you the words, we'll give you the analysis, the guidance. There's so many things you can read, it's been published. It's actually very straightforward, I promise you. Even though I get why it's scary to say, because the stigma is so real, it affects you. You're not even a worker and the stigma is affecting your way of organizing. That's how intense, right? But please include people who trade in sex, include people in the sex industry in your list of marginalized people who you stand and fight for. Do it publicly, list it, notice when it is being done, see when you can do it yourself.
Thank you, Mina. Elaine, would you like to turn your microphone back on and have the last word?
Yes, embrace the whole power, you know, like when we talk about different movement, that like whole movement is also important. And I hope the organizer will also share some of the link in the website of this Scholar Strike event. So one is like Stop the Bill 251, so that we hope people will sign. And this is a very important message to, especially we call for the organization support to stop the harm of anti-trafficking at policy and movement. And so the other is called a call of justice. So that is the demand to support the justice of migrant sex workers. So we hope that you not only sign, but share with your other co-workers. So this is a very important position to support the full decriminalization of sex work status for all. And the other thing is Butterfly is using different way. Today, we do not have so much chance to talk about art. So, but we have online arts exhibition so that to share some of the voices of the worker, but also the history of like how Butterfly do organizing, and hope you will visit our online exhibition and share. So, and I think as Mina and Mercedes said, it is very important to center the voice of the worker, but your support is also very important to support the leadership of the sex worker in the movement and show your support, because I think being silent is also part of the violence. So that being silent is also supporting that violence continue. So we need your support.
And this is an invitation. Contact Butterfly. You can contact me, Mina at protonmail.com. Invite us. We want to continue this conversation. I hope you have so many questions that we didn't let you ask in the chat so that we can continue these conversations.
And also pleasure workshop, right? So if any organization, any people want to do like sex pleasure also can.
Also be fun.
Amazing facilitator so that we can do it.
It sounds like we need to be engaged in a 2-day conference ourselves. Kind of feeling like.
Organize it for us.
Lovely. Aline, Mina, and Mercedes, thank you so much. Such extraordinary generosity. I learned so much, and I'm sure our audience has as well. And I really hope that we get the chance to continue this conversation in another venue and have more time. Two-day conference. Yes, let's have it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So much gratitude to all three of you. Thank you.
And we'll do it with so much dancing. That youth who danced yesterday, Mary Beth, and threw it down, that hip hop routine was amazing. I got up, danced, felt it in my body. There were tears.
So wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm just wondering if I could ask the three of you and the tech to stay in the